Hey guys, Troy here with Caveman Conversations, and we've got a fun one for you today. I've got Z. Z is what is the executive director?
Just director works.
Director, okay, at Wolf Hollow in Ipswich, and what a unique not for profit that you guys have going on. But I'll let you tell the story. So you jump in, introduce yourself, and tell us about how Wolf Hollow got started.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me. This is, even after all these years, always a little nervous doing these, but that means you're having fun.
You're telling this story every day, so I know you're good at it.
I'm not used to the mic in front though, so Wolf Hollow, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We got our nonprofit status in 1988 and officially opened our doors to the public in 1990. And that was with our first wolves. And our mission from that day onward has been to educate and advocate with the ultimate goal of saving wolves in the wild. Our hope is that when people come and visit us and see these guys with their own eyes up close and personal, it's going to leave an impact like nothing else can. And at the same time, you're going to leave, hopefully knowing at least one more thing about wolves, if not many more than one thing.
There's definitely an aspect that everybody's thinking right now, especially people that know it. I mean, this is right off of 133. If you're driving 133 between Essex and Ipswich,
Yeah.
you can't miss it. Everyone drives by
We're
it,
pretty much the last house or last property in Ipswich. Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, Wolf Hollow, what's that? I want to stop in there." Like everybody says that, so we get a chance to really tell them the story here. But at the same time, everybody's going, how did a wolf sanctuary, or you could describe it more, end up here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wanna know that. I want everybody to know that.
Yeah, well, I love that question when we get asked because it does seem so out of place, but there's a certain irony in the fact that Massachusetts was literally the first place in North America that had an official organized bounty or hunting, reward system for wolves. So really, that was, us bringing that conflict or that, um, way we looked at them, from our earliest foundings. How did Wolf Hollow happen? So, my father was born and raised in Ipswich. My grandfather as well was from the area. He was outdoor person his whole life. I think he really found his solace, his value, himself really in the nature of Ipswich and the surrounding communities, whether it's the marshes, the woods, and ultimately that would be the mudflats as a commercial clam digger. He chose that over a nice, office job with my uncle, as my family, up until the early 90s, did own Soffron Brothers Clam Company in Ipswich, which is now Ipswich Brewery, or Ipswich Ale, or the building is rather. In a nutshell, in the early 80s, he was hit by a drunk driver. That obviously led him to not be able to clam anymore, very physically, labor intensive job. So didn't really want to go sit in an office. So he, took some painting classes at Montserrat in Beverly. Something else he always wanted to do, but just never really found the time. So it was at Montserrat painting wolves, when he got the chance to paint what he wanted, that he got a lot of pushback. Why would you paint wolves? They're vicious, they're awful, they're this horrible creature. So, this is, early 80s after he had read everything he could about wolves that was coming out in the late 60s and early 70s. And this was his first time really seeing that, oh, wow, people really hate this animal still. So I think that, after the accident, he probably had a, what is my purpose moment. And through that recovery was also part of his healing was, starting to write letters to the federal government of, I would like to, create a nonprofit, a wolf sanctuary. How do I do this? He wrote a letter to Dr. Klinghammer, who founded Wolf Park in Battleground, Indiana in 1973. Dr. Klinghammer sent my dad back his own letter with his response was, if you're serious about this, you'll come out here for a month and see what it takes. And, shortly thereafter, he was on his way to Indiana. So and then through a lot of late nights writing, letters at the dining room table, we got our approval and opened with our first wolves in 1990. So
He just loved wolves.
I think he really saw himself in wolves, misunderstood, underappreciated, somewhat vilified. He didn't have, the most ideal childhood. It wasn't, awful by any means in the grand scheme of things. But, I just think that for a lot of us, we, trying to find, something that we can see ourselves in, in whatever it might be. And for him, that was wolves. But obviously there was a need to have more voices for them as well.
Yeah, because to be clear, we have 0 wolves in Massachusetts.
Technically speaking, yes, we have 0 wolves in Massachusetts outside of the wolves at Wolf Hollow and Stone Zoo. It does have wolves. I don't know their exact head count right now. And If there was others out there, there might be. But as far as officially speaking, no wild wolves in Massachusetts, nor have there been since probably the mid to late 1700s, stragglers aside. There was one instance in 2008 where a pure wolf was shot and killed in Western Mass by a gentleman after it killed his goats. Kind of whatever, everything I saw about that, I haven't looked in on it, in quite a while. But what was most likely going on there, that was a wolf that someone illegally procured, tried keeping as a pet, and then let go when they realized, this isn't going to be a dog, no matter what I think or what I try.
Yeah. Where are the closest wild wolves, and how would anybody get exposed to them?
Yeah, our closest wild, intact, sustainable wolf populations to us here in Cape Ann would be in Canada, over the border, of course. But as far as in the continental US, we're looking at western side of the Great Lakes, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and then the Yellowstone reintroduction brought wolves back to the northern Rockies, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. And then as wolves naturally leave their families to start their own, because a pack is nothing more than a family, and alpha is simply the parents, just like humans, right, kids? So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, but as wolves leave their families to start their own, that's how they, increase their range, avoid inbreeding, population control. And now we have wolves in Northern California, Eastern Washington State, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado, in some cases for the first time in 50 or 80 years. And that's why those federal protections are so important, because when we only have patchwork or potmark protections, then we really don't see those, environmental benefits.
And would they be dipping their toe from Canada into Maine
So
because of the just
absolutely. There's
wilderness?
and if before I forget, if anybody watching this wants to really take a good look at that, there's a great organization called the Maine Wolf Coalition, and actually they're doing a speaking event at Wolf Hollow in September. But he's really spent the better part of the last 10, 15 years trying to prove that wolves are making a comeback to Maine, whether that's coming down to use the bathroom and going back or whatnot, we don't know. But really, for the most part, any wolf leaving its, family, say in Canada, if it was to come south into Maine, it's going to be assimilated into our coyote population. And what we have in the Northeast is basically a naturally occurring hybrid of wolves and coyotes that originated in Ontario about 70 years ago. So that is why our coyotes are closer to 50 or even 60 pounds as opposed to out west, because there's already some wolf DNA in that. So really absent of an entire wolf pack being forced to relocate from Canada to, say, Maine, or an artificial reintroduction, any wolves coming down are just going to get, kind of mixed into that coyote population over time.
So, at Wolf Hollow, how many wolves do you have there today? What is the size of your property? Tell us about, like, really paint the picture for somebody if they're just listening to this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's hard to get an idea of what it looks like from the street with all the fencing. But the main enclosure is roughly an acre or 23,000 square feet. It is basically hills on two sides with a natural fed stream and pond in the middle. It's pretty much completely open as far as their ability to roam through that space. They have, natural formation, shelters, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have auxiliary enclosures, which are 5,000 square feet and up, depending on the space. Those are important because in the wild, if a wolf isn't getting the status that it wants in its family, doesn't want to be told what to do its whole life, wants to do its own thing, they do have the option to leave. So we do have to provide those alternatives. As I'm sure anybody listening to this could imagine, the consequences of leaving two wolves together that don't want to share company. so so that is one of our obviously our biggest responsibility is their, health and well-being, both mental, physical, et cetera. So
And you showed me some pictures. It's beautiful. It's like prairie is not the right word, but because of the water there, it almost feels like there's this like perfect, like full ecosystem there.
well, absolutely, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Yeah, we do have to have our shelters. That's one of our federal inspections. Do the wolves ever use them? No, but other than that, we do try and keep it as natural as possible. Whether it is as far as their pathways, I just try and or we try and clean out their pathways they're already using. If we find an alcove or a little spot in the bushes that they seem to be like, we'll just go in and kind of groom that. Make sure there's no sticks that could poke them. But in the pond we have ducks visiting, or a whooping crane, or you'll see crows coming down, or turkey vultures circling over. So a lot of stuff going on in there. Fish in the pond, or some butterflies. Everything's out there.
So because stuff does wander in, they do end up kind of catching their own game, but they mostly get fed purposefully by you.
So, yes, we do have a feeding schedule. So they do have a regular feeding schedule. It's a variety of things. We have our typical go-to, which is a product we get shipped in, 50 cases at a time. In the winter, we also really do enjoy the benefit of, the environmental police, local animal control bringing roadkill deer. And then also, we're very grateful for places like Appleton Farms in Ipswich and Common Crow in Gloucester, who've also donated some incredibly, bougie meats for the wolves. So they eat quite well. So they do have a regular feeding schedule. Now, in the case of critters getting in there, we do not ever, nor would we ever purposely put anything in there. Number one, that's illegal for us to do. Number two, that's completely immoral and unethical, in my opinion. And the wolves have a chance to catch things on their own. When Aquila, who is 7 now, when he was 2.5 months old, he caught 2 frogs his very first hour in the main enclosure, and he caught two because his sister stole the first one from him immediately. So whether it's remains of rodents or bird feathers, everything up to red tail hawks and fisher cats, I've found deceased in the wolf enclosure.
Yeah, I'm sure some of the prey starts to learn, don't go in there too.
As long as they, stay out and tell their friends that this side of the fence is good, but other side not so much. But yeah, actually, we actually got a little snapping turtle out of the wolf enclosure the other day too. So he's now, he didn't make it, but we tried.
Yeah. So, how many wolves do you have in there today?
Oh yeah, so back to the point. So currently we have 5 wolves in the main enclosure, and that is 23,000 square feet. As far as spatial concerns, AZA recommendations are 5,000 square feet for every 2 wolves and 1,000 square feet for every wolf after that. So you can do the math: 23,000 square feet, 5 wolves. We're well under capacity for that space. Is that my limit? No, so maybe in a couple of years we might want to bring in a couple puppies, but I think around 8 or 9 would be my limit, which would still be well under that capacity. Now, if we do have to move a wolf into another space, our smallest enclosure or our auxiliary enclosures are good for at least 2 wolves, if not more. And the idea for that is that, if a wolf did have to be removed, they would have a companion of some sort. And that is going to be dependent on the situation. When Scully had to be removed at 1.5 years, we immediately started looking for a companion. When we lost her sibling Grendel, who was her last surviving sibling 2 years ago, they were both 12. So with Linnea at 12, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get her a puppy for various reasons. So everything is still situational. But Linnea is doing great. She still likes to chase my weed whacker when I'm doing chores in her enclosure. At 14, she, is doing awesome physically. So.
How did you get the first wolves? Was this like these wolves got hurt scenario? Like you
Yeah, this is important basically for listeners to understand kind of how we do this actually, because it's beyond just our first wolves, but how we get these guys comfortable living, because, Ipswich, Massachusetts isn't their natural habitat. So all of our wolves, so we are allowed to have a breeding program. Our licensing authorities are the USDA and Mass Fish and Wildlife. We are allowed to have a breeding program, and we did do that in the early 90s. And the goal was to get that family dynamic. You're going to see different things with two parents, three 3-year-olds and two 1-year-olds, and you're going to see with two 7-year-old wolves together, quite frankly. However, at 5 acres, thinking about the ethics of keeping wolves in captivity, period, our goal, our mission isn't to promote as many wolves living in captivity as possible. So, we discontinued that, breeding program in the late 90s. So today, when we are looking for new additions, which is about every 5 or 6 years on average, we are at least doubling their lifespan in captivity, which sadly in the wild is only 4 to 6. So, every 5 or 6 years, we'll, have the conversation, reach out to the state, get permission to do so, and then we will start putting the word out to other sanctuaries that do have breeding programs. We're going to say, even a year ahead of time, if not more, hey, if you guys are having puppies next year, you have 5, only want to keep 3, we'd love to give a home to those other 2. And they're going to have a great life being ambassadors to thousands of visitors and hopefully, educating and, saving wolves in the wild ultimately.
so this is where like Indiana could you guys could share that.
Yeah, we have gotten wolves from Wolf Park. Osa and Nina came to us from Wolf Park in Indiana in 2005. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the 3 Arctics we got from the Plumpton Park Zoo in Rising Sun, Maryland. So I think they were 3 of a litter of 5. So
So what What do people need to know about wolves to break down the barriers? Because that, like, when people come to visit Wolf Hollow, it's an education opportunity. It's an opportunity to sort of like open your mind and learn more than anything.
Mm.
Because if it's not something, it's not a zoo. It is a real educational facility about a very specific species more than it is anything. So give sort of that version of what do people take away from this um, when they go there to learn.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And not to knock zoos, they've come a long way, but it's we like you really nailed it, is that we are very specific. We talk about wolves, we're here for wolves. We keep it small. So as far as, for our younger friends, wolves aren't scary. Wolves are families, they're parents and children and, aunts and uncles, just like us. Wolves just want to, do what they're left to, which is raising their young, going forward, providing for, next generation. Through all that, they're providing some amazing ecosystem balances. There's a reason we call them apex predator keystone species. A great, if listeners or viewers have an extra 4.5 minutes, check out How Wolves Change Rivers on YouTube. Essentially, after a 70-year absence of wolves in Yellowstone, just within a few years of being back, we saw a total resurgence in the landscape. And just last week, an article about how much the aspen and spruce trees are booming just because of the wolves in Yellowstone. Because prior to wolves there was nothing moving those animals around the park, and that was having a lot of damage to the environment. Secondly, wolves are killing the sick, the weak, the infirm. They're contributing to natural selection, survival of the fittest. Wolves are benefiting many other species of animal, from beetles, insects, birds of prey, foxes, crows, ravens. So again, they're not scary. They're an important animal to have in our ecosystem. And number three is they need our help. When we started doing this work in 1990, we were only talking about wolves being hunted in Alaska, because Alaska had always been exempt from the Endangered Species Act for many reasons. Sadly, today, wolves are being hunted in a handful of, Western states, from the, Western Great Lakes to Northern Rockies. And, this is where I also am very careful to tread lightly because, my dad being a deer hunter, growing up eating that deer meat, we're not here to bash the hunting community. Great respect for people that practice that tradition. But when you're hunting an animal because, you want to show it off to your friends, or bragging rights, or to use the fur, and also, that's, there's various opinions on that, use of the animal. But what we're seeing in places like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, I'm not going to speak for Wolf Hollow, but I Z would call that a torture campaign. Some of the things that are going on out there. So, and I don't want to get into that stuff. People could check that out if they want, but Google Wolves Wyoming and you'll see some scary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, a very easy one to make the example of is the white-tailed deer. I mean, we all are hitting more white-tailed deers with our cars. Just that simply.
Mhm.
The white-tailed deer was prey of a wolf. I'm originally from Michigan. We have white-tailed deer. There's no predator to white-tailed deer anymore. We stopped hunting them as humans considerably, and we eradicated wolves as an example, and that's just one of many examples of how this is
I'll give you
happening.
another example. They actually did a study on this, in Wisconsin. Wolves are said to save Wisconsin insurance companies and premium payers $10 million a year, because the same deer with that low risk assessment are going to watch a pack of wolves come at it, the same one that watch a car come at it from a distance. So,
Yeah.
so that, or Yellowstone. Well, the reintroduction of wolves brings an estimated $7 million a year to the park itself, especially during what were known as the dead months, January, February, and March, when no one was coming. And that also is bringing an estimated $25 million to the surrounding rural restaurants, hotels, gas stations. Now they can pay their employees and don't have to shut down for 3 months. So, so beyond just the environmental aspect, we're far too often told that, the environment and the economy are diametrically opposed. And with wolves, at least, that's not the case in a couple ways.
But we don't have wolves here outside of your Wolf Hollow. what's the goal? Like, what are we gonna do with this?
Yeah, I'd love to just see, us have the protections that were in place 15 years ago for wolves before we started seeing delistings. Wolves only occupy about 30% of what's considered potential range, places they could, obviously, I'm not going to want to see wolves back in Ipswich, Massachusetts or Gloucester. It's just not an appropriate habitat, but there's a lot of space out there that wolves could thrive. But really, I just think the ultimate goal is to just have some common sense balance, and we establish our national parks for everybody's enjoyment, for future generations, my grandkids, hopefully one day, and while it might be a short-term economic boom to go in and clear cut, an old forest, or, delist the stage growth so we can go and get oil out of that spot. You're doing generations of impact that might never go back to the way it was. So, there's so few less and less wild places, and really wolves are the symbol for wild, intact, natural spaces. And I think that, it's pretty clear that we're running out of those faster than we'd like to admit. So, but just, common sense, allowing a place for this animal to thrive and survive and just do what it was put here to do. And just to take the fear and the animosity, because, whether it's, the environment or so many other things, when I grew up, I saw a lot more compromise and listening to each other. And that's why I'm not going to say that all ranchers are evil and, every hunter is evil. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to just show people something with their own eyes, give them some information, and let them draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, because if we give them the protection, they're not likely to migrate down to Ipswich, but they could be in the forests of Maine.
They definitely Moosehead Lake region has been studied. That would be a great potential location for wolves to make a comeback to. That could help with, I know they're having issues with, moose, and whether it's overpopulation or there's some like tick stuff going on up there with, some pretty evasive things, but, just reset the balance really.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like it is a chain effect, right? If the wolves aren't hunting the deer and the deer are spreading the ticks because there's more deer, I guess it just continues to
Well, the
cascade.
deer, but also, mice are one of the biggest carriers of Lyme tick as well. So, a healthy coyote populations will keep that away as well. So.
Yeah, because you are kind of actually kind of advocating for coyote because of how close they are.
I mean, they're essentially doing the same thing that wolves did here 300 years ago.
Yeah,
And now it's just, this isn't a proper space for wolves, but coyotes do quite well, and if we can take the fear away from that, just education is such a great, I guess, countermeasure to fear and ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance like, oh, you're stupid or ignorant, more as like, I don't know yet, and that's why we feel, so strongly about what we do is very powerful. And again, I'm a dog owner. We have 7 cats, I get all the fears of that, but, we also have to take our own responsibility, when we live around these animals, to, take pretty simple common sense measures to make sure that, they're,
yeah, like don't let your dog just go out at 11 o'clock at night without keeping an eye on it when you're back up to a forest and you've literally heard coyotes and fisher cats and stuff in your forest. Like let's pay attention to that.
exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely.
No, that's fair. You're not calling anybody out there. That's a fair reminder of like because
And
there
it'd be on coyotes, but just like, it's, 7 cats, none of them go outside, because, in addition to, coyotes, but hit by cars, birds of prey, there's just too many things out there. So.
yeah. Okay, so if somebody wanted to come check this out, because I think everybody should check this out because I don't know how many wolf sanctuaries, if I'm going to use that word loosely today, there are in the United States, but you're probably the only one in New England, or at least the only one I've ever heard of, and it's right here in our backyard on Cape Ann, which is fantastic. So it's like, why not? When and how should people come visit you?
Yeah, so it really depends on the experience that people want. So if you want to see, wolves in their height of activity, running, playing, jumping on each other, wrestling, December, January, February, that's their favorite time of year. They're in their full winter coats, that's when people are going to see that, National Geographic wolf they came to see. Summertime, we get a lot of people say, oh, they're a lot smaller and skinnier than I thought, because they've blown their winter coats. And, quite frankly, wolves are nature's marathon runners. Their whole thing is endurance, long distance travel, chasing down prey. So, there'll be some activity. They might take a dip in the pond, or we do enrichment, which is, something we do every day, whether we have visitors or not, puzzles, games, scent rolls, things to keep the wolves engaged and stimulated. So we'll do things like that just so people could see, a little bit of that activity if the wolves aren't, being super active, but, they're not going to ever see a wolf bouncing on a ball or, eating off an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
I think fall is really nice just because, the colors are changing. Their space is really looking nice with the oranges and everything coming in. And then, you have a good amount of activity and it's not so freezing cold that, the kids want to leave in 15 minutes.
And it's not so hot that the wolves are lethargic.
That too, yeah, that too, yeah.
Everyone's
Or you get
been
to watch one of our presenters, sweating through their t-shirt. Visitors have a roof, but we don't.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so if somebody were to come, let's say in the I well, number one, you can always go to wolfhollowipswich.org. There's a calendar, there's ticket buying, there's everything right there to find these dates and times. So like just like every other awesome place like this, just go to the website. There's times there. But you guys do public events, so you don't have to like you can just show up with a couple people. You can buy an individual ticket, you can buy a kid's ticket. Those are at like 10 and 12:30. And then you also have private events. So somebody could buy a private time slot. What is it, like $200? You can bring up to how many people?
I think it's 20 people. So again, that's, if you bought that ticket and brought 19 of your friends, it's, equal to or maybe less than the walk-on price for adult tickets. So
Yeah.
and that was actually you got to find the silver lining in anything. Wolves teach us adaptability, flexibility. So we took those into COVID and, after, a couple months of shutting down, we started the private tours and they were so popular even after COVID. It's maybe there's a family that wants that really private experience or we've had people book that for a first date, or an anniversary. So yeah.
So that's like simply like shoot an email over, somebody will respond to
You can
you.
book that on the, website as well. So you're just gonna go on the date you wanna come, it'll give you the options, whether it's to buy a public, tour ticket at 10 and 12:30, or if you wanna book the, 11:30 private tour slot. Also, in September, one of the things that's very exciting is, generally speaking, everything goes to the wolves, food and medical care, but, we've actually worked really hard fundraising and doing, extra, raising because, we're actually putting the finishing touches on a new lighting system, and that'll allow us to, go back to doing what are howl nights. So we're having our, first howl night in many years, I think September 6th, which is a Friday night, I believe. So that'll be exciting. So see the wolves under the moon, we'll howl at the end. So, but yeah, and then, Maine Wolf Coalition coming up. So yeah, so we're trying to this is our 35th anniversary year. Officially in September, we will be 35 years old. So there'll be lots of fun events, hopefully some mini event, at a offsite space somewhere in Ipswich. I don't want to, still in the planning process, but it's an exciting year, 35. It's, in some ways it feels like we started this yesterday and some my back tells me it's been 35 years every day, but it's I feel blessed every day to work amongst these animals and it's for all the blood, sweat, and tears, it's an incredible privilege. And, just the more and more I do this, the more, I'm seeing how many ways wolves affect people. I had a young lady, probably in her mid-20s, who came out and saw the wolves and she started crying. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, please, cry all you want. So, or I tell visitors that bring their 3 and 4-year-olds, while the little guys might not remember Trophic Cascade or words like that today, you're planting a seed,
Right.
and I love Grimm Brothers. I love fairy tales, but when we only see one side of things constantly, it does form, opinions. And for wolves, that has had real consequences over the last several hundred years.
Yeah, and I have to give credit where credit's due always when I can. This isn't your full-time gig. You're out here doing the Lord's work for wolves, but you're also a teacher in the school district, and you work a full-time, job while also finding all this time to care for them every day, not just days where there's visitors coming to learn the story. It is rolling around with the wolves every other day too,
Hmm.
and feeding them and grooming them and creating relationships with them and maintaining those, which is like raising your own kids, essentially.
Yeah.
And that can go thankless, I guess, sometimes, but
It can get lonely for sure. I am blessed in that we have an amazing volunteer crew and a very small paid staff, something that, was new to us because, for years we're nonprofit, we can't pay people. But it was finally a business group that said, you need to hire someone because you can't do this, like you're doing it.
you're gonna burn yourself out.
Yeah, yeah, and, I'm still pretty good at trying to do that, so, but no, I am blessed because, there's other people that, do this with a lot less, support, whether it's, physical support, but no, it's, and I'm also, again, middle school art teacher. This will be my 20th year, and, I always knew I'd be an artist. I always knew somehow I'd work with wolves, and, it feels like that, 35 years later, it's all kinda come to where, it should be. And I will tell you, it was last week I was out there in my, third t-shirt of the day at 11:30 in the morning, weed whacking in 95-degree weather. And, two of the boys are, snoozing comfortably under their shade, and it's all worth it, so the blood, sweat, and tears. And, hopefully I have a few more years in me, but I always like to say if tomorrow is the end, I've lived, so many lives in my 49 years. So I'm
Do you
very lucky.
need anything? Do you need another helper? Do you need another contributor? If there was a need that you had over there, what is it?
Where I mean, not where again, I like to lead by example. It's if we have a mess in the Jiffy John, I'm the director. I'm gonna tell the volunteers, you go deal with you go take care of the wolves. I'll take care of the Jiffy John. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So we always need the help, but also it's like as as much as we just can't. It takes a lot. We just can't throw someone in the wolf pen to clear
Literally,
poison
can't
ivy.
throw you to the
So
wolves. It's
yeah.
the same.
But no, as far as that, one of the things our being our 35th year, we I do want to look forward towards doing more things like camps or, a community day where a family could come and we could do some, low-key gardening or maybe small craft projects to beautify the area. And then maybe a small, like, children geared presentation after. And that's where just the creativity of what we do is so great because, there's so many wolves. I've talked about wolves, the family aspect or the hunters, but also I've had, corporate groups because they're really awesome when it comes to teamwork, leadership, cooperation. There's just so many ways that wolves can hit people. So
Yeah, and so anybody can come out there.
yeah.
Schools, corporate
Schools, we
group.
do, yeah, Cub Scouts, corporate groups. Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
yeah, and then, in the winter, we do go to more of a, tour format system. Again, every time you come, no matter what, you're gonna see wolves, you're gonna learn about wolves. The tour format's just a little bit more movement-based in the winter, so we kinda do, like, 15 minutes at the different spots just so, people don't start freezing. So, but yeah, it's always just check the website. We have a awesome, Viana, who you've, organized all this through. She is phenomenal on our social media. She's done so well as far as just getting our name out there or finding partnerships. She had the audacity to go and have a baby last week, so you're stuck with just me
Congratulations.
today. So, but a first shout out to that. So,
We do love to give shout outs on here. Actually, you can hold that cup up. We'll give a shout out to Guggen's in Essex, a local sandwich shop, food shop, a lunch shop,
provisions.
coffee shop. Yeah, all of your provisions. Shout out to Guggen's in Essex. They make a killer like turkey club sandwich that I get there all the time.
No, good
We
stuff.
we love the local businesses. That's
Absolutely.
the whole point of this, and I appreciate you coming on here and telling your story. I personally can admit that I've driven by it so many times with the intention of I got to go learn about this thing. This is crazy. This is right here in my backyard. So I invite everybody to come down there and get a tour or set up a private event. It's very inexpensive and you'll learn something and it'll be different. Go on a date there? That sounds like a fun first date.
Oh no.
Nobody's hitting you up on Tinder going, "You wanna go to a wolf hollow, like, and see wolves?" You might
Oh,
stand out.
you might get the what? What swipe do you want? I don't even.
I don't even know either. I'm lucky like that.
No, we actually have you hosted weddings as well. So yeah, we had a wedding there last year. So
Good. Well, Z, I appreciate you coming on here, and I appreciate what you do for wolves.
no, it's it's a joy, and again, it sounds cliche, but when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, and there's a lot to be said for that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Alright, bud.
all right,
Good luck.
thank you.